All right, well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Scott Cuthbert. I'm CEO of Safepedia. And with me, as always, is Corrie Pitzer, CEO of Safemap International. And I'm going to turn it over to Corrie. He's going to introduce the topic for today and our special guest.
Thank you, Scott. This is another edition in our series about deep safe principles. And for those of you who've watched this before, the deep safe principles are equivalents to Deming's 14 principles. And what we've done over the years, for 30, 40 years now, working with Deming principles, translated these into what we call deep safe, which is probably an alternative term for safety 2 or safety differently. It's just what we always used to call our approach to safety. And so today's principle that we're going to analyze and explore is Deming's words, or principle statement is adopt and institute leadership. And he had a very strong focus on that in organizations. We translated that not too far away from that, and our terminology here is applying daring and caring leadership at all levels. And those are two important points. So this is what we're talking about today, daring and caring. And like always, we invite guests to this webinar. And the guests are mostly organizations that have applied and used the concepts of Safemap in one way or another, and in smaller and larger scales. So you'd remember, maybe some of you have seen this before. The first one was De Beers, and we introduced the approach that we installed at De Beers. You'll see more of these coming. Today is Anglo Base Metals, and the executive head for safety is Renier Swart. You will see he's got a similar accent to mine. Renier is an engineer, which I think is the right angle on safety, the engineering side of it. But Renier is an outstanding executive in the field of safety and a leader in many, many ways. So Renier, if I could ask you to just introduce yourself with your background and your expertise.
Yeah, thanks, Corrie. Thanks, Scott, for the invite. And thank you for the gracious words around me. And look, I've been working for Anglo for over 20 years now. Started at operational level after finishing metallurgical engineering in Johannesburg, and then working my way through the levels to, work eventually in Brazil for 7 years, and now I'm based in London as part of the Anglo-American Base Metals team. Anglo-American Base Metals is an old business unit in Anglo-American, but it's currently focusing on South America. We have most of our operations there, mainly copper, nickel type resources that we are mining. We also control the iron ore operations in Brazil from a regional perspective, and then we do have some exploration and new projects that we are developing in other parts of the world. So I've been part of the base metals team for the last 3 years, and I look after safety and sustainability. And the challenge in safety, we all know, is huge. And on the sustainability side, we are finding more and more synergies between the safety of our people, but also the world and the direction the world is traveling in. So thank you very much for the invite.
Renier, thanks. People, you talk about a couple of mines here, a couple of mines there. I think just give people an insight into the scope of operations. How many people you employ? What is the scope of what you're doing? It's phenomenal.
Yeah, the base metals operations consist of two copper mines in Chile. We have about 8,000 people working there, an integrated smelter as well. And then we have a brand new project in Peru that similarly employs about 5,000-6,000 people. It is the largest new copper project to be brought online in the last 5 years or so, or more actually. And then in Brazil, we have two older nickel operations. One has been running for over 40 years, and they have about 2,000 people between them, and another, the iron ore operation, which is called Minas Rio. It's a challenging operation, but also quite an important project from an iron ore quality perspective. It's an integrated mine concentrator with a 530-kilometer slurry pipeline to the port, which we operate as well. And we have about 4,000 people working there. And then across the rest of the world, we have some projects. Our latest project is in Finland, and we have some people there doing exploration plus the environmental impact assessments and things that's necessary to develop a mine or an operation in the future there.
So that's nearly 20,000 people around your operations, and then you can add almost as many of those numbers in terms of contractors, business partners that are all engaged in extremely high-risk work. I think people generally don't appreciate just the amount of risk, the level of risk, and the enormity of mining companies in terms of what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for that, just to put it into perspective.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is going to be a great conversation today. Can't wait to jump in. So let's get started. Corrie, we'll start with you, and we'll want you to dive into, the importance of the Deep Safe Principle number 7.
Leadership has been a topic probably, forever, in biblical times and before. What is a leader and what do leaders do? And if you look at, if you just say the names, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Nelson Mandela, all of these names just conjure up emotional images of people who are just great, people who are doing fantastic things. And that's almost the perception of what leadership is. Leaders are great people. If I said, well, listen to these names, Daniel Schmidt, Terry Alderson, Lionel Vusi, no one would know who these people are. But these people are frontline supervisors who are leading small teams and who are making a huge difference in the lives of those people that they lead. But it's not only the people that they lead, people who report to them, it is also people that they impact on. So a leader is not a position in an organization. It's not the equivalent of a manager, just a better manager, as you see often in the literature. They try to depict the manager as a leader when they do certain things. Well, a leader is a person who makes a difference, and a leader can impact people above them, people to the side of them, people around them. So leaders make a difference, and that's, to me, the one thing. They lead change. They actually lead change. If you just step into a role and you don't make any difference to anything, you just maintain the status quo, I don't think you're a leader. You have to start to make changes for the better, and you have to do that from the front. So in whatever small way you may do this, a leader pioneer things. They explore new opportunities, and they take people with them to make that happen. So in terms of safety, we certainly, there are leaders in safety in what we achieve over the years, but do we really have leadership in the safety arena is my question, when you talk about what happens at the front line. So it is a very, very important topic, and Deming recognized that nothing happens if we don't have leaders in the organization. So that's the importance of it today.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. So, Renier, how does Anglo-American define leadership versus management, tying into what Corey had talked about?
Yeah, look at Anglo-American and in base metals, well, firstly, I probably need to say that at Anglo-American, our purpose is to reimagine mining to improve people's lives, which to me resonates with a lot of people and the world we live in today. And for that, you need a special type of leader. And because this is not going to be we are not saying we will be the best mining company in the world. We are saying that as well, but we are focusing on something bigger than us, and something that the mining industry has not been seen to do, over the past millennia. It's not always been seen as a catalyst to improve people's lives, or something that actually makes people's lives safer and better. And from that perspective, we do need management. We have managers that are focused on execution, continuous improvement, systemic stability that you need. But we also need leaders that create this vision and shapes this vision for our people, that shapes the culture and inspire. All the names Corey used is people that we got inspirations from across the world, and they are transversal amongst different cultures around the world. And these are people that really motivates us to get up every morning with the passion and with the zest that we need to change things around us. These guys are the leaders that we want to transform and enable our organization to achieve its goals. But from my perspective, it is important that we recognize that we do need leaders and managers. And in some cases, these are the same people. And they need to be actively aware of when you need to manage things and when you need to be a leader. And you do need to have that ability to be a dual citizen of the leadership and management core in your organization.
Yeah, great. That's a great point. I don't think people talk about that enough. So Corey, what are the practices of a deep, safe leader versus just a leader, and are they not the same?
If you talk about leadership, and there's many models around leadership that is thrown around a lot. We haven't defined a deep, safe leader from scratch. We've actually based it on a very well-known, widely used leadership model of Kouzes and Posner. And they have identified 5 practices that leaders enact, if I could put it that way. And they said that leaders model the way. They inspire with a vision. They challenge the processes. They enable others to act, and they encourage hearts. And that's what leaders do if they are not managing. And a very important and great point from Renier is that most of the time we actually need people to manage the processes in a stable and predictable way. Plan, do, check, act mode. But when we talk about leadership and creating inspiration in the organization, we've translated each of those practices of Kouzes and Posner into deep, safe practices. And where did we get this from? Well, from the military. Because when you look at the world of safety, we are leading people into high-risk environments. We're leading people into danger. That's what we do. We're taking people from a cozy circumstance above ground, and we send them deep underground to work in a stope. Incredible risk. So what organization is renowned for taking people to danger and inspiring them all the way? It's the military. I have a military background. I spent 2 years in the military as a platoon commander, and I was trained in the skills of a leader. Now, to me, that's where I got the inspiration from to say, well, what does a deep, safe leader do differently? So if the Kouzes and Posner says, leaders model the way, they show how it's done. The deep, safe leader they show passion, they share passion, and people can touch and sense their passion. And just instead of just inspire with a vision, they inspire from the front. That's what the military leader does. They lead from the front. They not only challenge the status quo, but they dare to differ in a deep, deep sense. They challenge everything and around them. Instead of just enable others to act, a military and a high-risk leader embolden others. They give people that courage to act. And the fifth practice of course is important, is encourage hearts. Well, in a high-risk environment, you have to touch people's hearts. You have to, that zest that Renier just mentioned, that comes from a person that is truly a deep, safe leader. And we've added a sixth practice. And that sixth practice is they show competence. Not technical competence, that's what a manager should have, but they show competence in creating the circumstances where people around them are willing to speak out and speak up. They create that circumstance, and it's typically called psychological safety. I don't like it, I like to call it psychological readiness more. But that's what those leaders do. People speak up and out. And there's a famous line in I think in a movie of some war movie where a Marine soldier would stand in front of the sergeant major yelling in his face, and then he would yell back, "Permission to speak, sir." In the face of that risk, he still wants to speak up and speak out. That's what deep, safe leaders do. And in an environment where there is a lot of risk and threats around people, we need that kind of leader to make the difference.
Great, thank you, Corrie. So building on that, Renier, do you have a specific model of leadership in Anglo?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, we do. You know, firstly, maybe I should mention that at Anglo American, we've got our shared values that we are working to and working to across all our organization. The values of safety, care and respect, integrity, accountability, collaboration, and innovation. And this is not something new. Many companies across the world have that sort of list of values that sort of typifies the culture that they want to see and sort of the playing field that they want to play on in terms of the organization. In Anglo American, we have an organizational model. It's got its foundations in the work done on the requisite model by Dr. Jacques Elliott, and we do have further developed by Dr. Ian McDonald in systems leadership, him and Catherine Burke and Carl Stewart. And we've got three simple principles on the organizational model, and this is having people in the right roles to do the right work, and having the right people in those roles as well. And this is the fundamental for us to have those qualified people in well-described roles, doing the work that is, you know, not wasteful, that is work towards the right, so everybody works in the right direction as well. And this is the type of high-performing culture that then enables people to give their best, because they know they're on the right role, they know they're in the right work, and they're working on the right things. So that's the first thing that we have. Second to the organizational model, we also have the Anglo operating model. And this is our model that actually is based on plan, do, check, act, and the Deming cycle, but also it's there to sort of link strategy with execution. And it's the way that we actually take that vision and the expectations from leaders that challenges us, and how do we take that and safely turn that into execution and to tasks we can do in the short, medium, and even in the long term. So those are the two models we are using in Anglo at the moment, Scott.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Now, Corrie, I know you have a lot of passion when we get into these topics and dig in. So maybe talk about what a passionate leadership is.
I think passion is one of those things. It's like beauty. You know it when you see it. You know, passionate leadership, when you are touched by it, you can't describe it, you can't define it, you can't give you know, criteria for what would be a passionate leader. You can see that in terms of what that person does, and when you are touched by it. And I used the name of Lionel Vusi earlier on, and that's a person that touched me with his passion. And I was doing with Anglo American. I was doing a program called Elimination of Fatalities, and where we visited all 40 odd mine sites in Anglo, and we engaged with people in the front line to identify fatal risks in their environments through and with them. And so you engage with teams underground. So I was underground in a coal mine in South Africa, and here was this team that you could immediately sense this is a different team. There's something about them. They talk passionately about what they do. They talk passionately about each other. They support each other. You look into what they do in their section. It is just perfect, and you wonder, why is this so perfect? And I started asking them a bit about their leader. So the supervisor was there. I asked him, what is it about his leadership that you know, emboldens him? And then he starts talking about the passion of his mine captain, whose name is Lionel. And I said, where is the mine captain? He says, no, he's not here today. This is underground in the coal mine. So that I went up, you know, above ground in the afternoon, and I'm starting to search for this mine captain, because normally the mine captains are underground, and he's in his office. And I said, hey, I want to just have a chat with you. I was at your section today. Sure. So we started talking, and I said to him, and you could feel it, this guy is just on it. And I said to him, you know, how often do you get underground and to your section? And he says, as little as I possibly can, which was just such a shock to me. Well, shouldn't the leader be out there with his team and inspire them and be with them? And he said to me, if I'm down there, I'm in their way. My job as a leader is not to go and kick tires there, not to tell them how to do the mining. They know, I've trained them. They have the skills, they have the resources. My job is to take care of them. My job is to make sure they have the right equipment. And when I go there, I know they have everything they need. And then what I then do is, if I go down, I engage with them. That's my people. We are a team. And then I knew, okay, leaders don't have to be out there engaging with people and talking to people and looking at what they do. Leaders have to affect people, and they don't have to be there to do it. And that's passion. So that's my example of passionate leadership, a real person.
Well, that's great. Great example. So Renier, leaders, do they create culture, or are they shaped by it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. In my experience, culture and leadership work in symbiosis, right? They have a symbiotic partnership. They feed off each other. You cannot have the one without the other, and both culture and leadership is influenced by what happens on the other side, right? Leaders define and articulate the aspects of the culture they want to see, right? They influence their people, they gain the trust of people, but they are also influenced by the existing culture that dynamically develops over time in a specific section, in a specific operation, even in a community or a culture associated with the country that you operate in. To me, it's really important that leaders are actively aware how these internal and external events, like for instance, COVID over the past 2 years, or even smaller events in the community or in the shift, influences the organizational culture on a small or larger scale, and they adapt in order to stay on the path towards the desired culture. And this is where leaders have to find the balance between sort of being challenging and being inspirational, but also show people that there's consistent behaviors that needs to be done when you face certain challenges, right? And for me, an important topic around when we talk about this is always the authenticity of leaders. People see through leaders really quickly. And if you are not authentic in your practices and demonstrate integrity, you will never build their trust. And that's the foundation of all leaders, that they gain that trust, that passion that Corrie was talking about. You know, they're not going to get that if they don't trust their leader. And if the leader don't trust its team, you know. So for me, that old saying about, you know, do as I say, not as I do, is something that is really detrimental to an organizational culture and the trust. So yes, I think leaders create culture and they are also shaped by it, but it's the measure of how actively they are aware of their influence that really distinguishes your average leaders from your really passionate, great leaders.
Right. Great. And so, Corrie, in the beginning of the discussion today, you talked about deep safe principle number 7 and the caring and sharing leadership, or sorry, daring and caring leadership. So can you describe those a little bit more in detail for us now?
Yeah, maybe with another little story. Anybody that's been to my Deep Safe Leadership course would know the story of Mr. Drummond. He's become quite famous in Safemap and people, and we've probably 10, 15,000 people went through our training courses. Drummond is not his real name. I was always protecting his real name, but he's a real person. He was my first manager when I started in South Africa on a platinum mine. And he was the first manager that said to me when I arrived as the human resource manager for the mine, appointed by the head office to tell him he's going to have a human resource manager, which he hated. And he's the guy that sent me on the ground and said, you go get a blasting ticket, young man. He called me son. You go get a blasting ticket. You have to know what real people do in a real job before you can get and sit here in your office as human resource manager, which I did. The most important experience of my life was that. And I used to go to, to meetings when I was a miner. When I used to meetings when he was sitting in front there on the stage, and the hall was full of people. He was an Irishman. He was as tough as nails. And he would say, I don't care if you stay down that mine until I have my centaurs. Now, the centaurs is a cubic meter of rock, platinum ore that we measure how much we mine. And he said, I don't care if you stay down there, but I want my centaurs out the mine first. That was this guy. Then I finished my training. I became the human resource manager. And one of my first duties was to go and actually give the news of a death of a miner to the family. And he didn't want to go with me. I convinced him to go with me. And we sat down in this house. And the scenario was, there was this little girl, the daughter of this miner, Danny White was his name, and his daughter's name was Linky. And we just broke the news to the mother. The little girl heard her mother crying, and she walked into the room and she asked her mother, what's the problem? And the mother then said to the little girl, the managers came to tell us that daddy will not come home tonight. And she did this in Afrikaans. And Mr. Drummond sat there and he didn't know what she was saying because he's Irish. And he said to me, what is she saying? And I said, well, the little girl then looked at Mr. Drummond and said to him, why is my daddy not coming home tonight? And he looked at me and said, what is she saying, Corrie? I said, sir, she's asking you why her daddy is not coming home tonight. That was the watershed moment in this guy's life. He broke down at that moment in 1,000 pieces. And that's the day he understood what caring leadership is all about. He started talking about, and for that time, it was daring. He said, we can't go on mining and injuring and killing people. We can mine without killing people. Still today, it is a daring statement. It is pushing the boundaries. And as time went on, he became a very great example for me about leadership. And that's what we based our deep safe leadership practices on his legacy. And he used to say, the most important to come out of my mind is the minor. And that was a statement that was, he must have read it somewhere. But that was so different from him saying, I don't care if you stay down there, I want my centers out of the mine. And when people started hearing him saying, the most important coming out of the mine is you, that was a transformational difference. And that was what showed people that he cared. And that is what I think is the heart and soul of safety. Not how many good numbers we have, not what trends we can show in graphs to the board, but just how the people at the front end, how they experience and being touched by what people around them do about safety. So that's the difference, or the definitions of daring and caring leadership.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. That's always a moving story, and definitely a great example of daring and caring. So, Renier, you mentioned leadership models earlier. Can you measure leadership within your organization?
Look, leadership has been traditionally measured in many ways, right? It's always sort of, success. Have we achieved our goals? Is the KRAs looking good? Is our strategic objectives being achieved? Right. So that's the traditional way that we've sort of measured that in the industry and in the mining industry specifically as well. But personally, I think that only tells half the story of, measuring of the measure of a leader, right? I think there's something about a leader that and its legacy that Corrie touched on just now with the Mr. Drummond example. Most exceptional leaders I've spoken to and have worked for have all had one thing in common. They wanted to leave a legacy, something that outlasted them. And that legacy didn't have to be in their lifetime, right? Strangely, sometimes you only realize what this person made a difference in your life after he's left the company or left the earth, right? But I think, for me, if I have to go and measure leadership today, the only way for me to accurately do it is to go and speak to the people that's being led, and ask them simply, do you trust your leader? Will you follow your leader into battle, as Corrie was mentioning earlier? Are you willing, when you get to work, are you excited? Do you feel safe enough to approach your leader with all your issues? Are you happy to be transparent and not fear retribution or some type of political situation when you speak to your leader? And for me, that's the measure of an exceptional leader. That the feedback and the measurement cannot really be done through numbers. It will eventually culminate in numbers, but I think the immediate way to do that is to really assess it from the people that's being led. And good leaders do that by just talking to people themselves, and they measure themselves continuously, right? Good leaders that I've seen listens much more than what they talk. And they listen actively, not just to what people say, but they listen and see the signs and the symbols around the workplace that they need to react to see if they are good leaders. And I think that's the way that we should be measuring leaders at our operations.
Great, thank you. Corey, you talked about transformation earlier. So you say leaders always lead transformation, but what do they transform?
I think I can only refer to what do they transfer in our terminology, transformation towards deep safe. And that's the best topic that I know. They make changes in organizations, but what is deep safe? And how do an organization, transform itself towards that? And it all lies in the most foundational definition of safety. I mean, if you ask people, what is safety? You get so many responses. You get so many angles on that. What is safety? And the most common definition is safety is the absence of harm, the absence of accidents. And you cannot deny that. Of course, that's the opposite of safe. Is it's not safe. There are accidents, people getting hurt, people getting harmed. But then it goes a bit further. It can't be all, because people may nearly be hurt, but it just doesn't happen. Near misses. People are exposed to risks that are uncontrolled. It doesn't happen. It doesn't turn into an event. So the absence of accidents or the reduction of accidents, that cannot be the definition, that the final definition of safe. So there must be something more. And, you know, it's a topic that I've been contemplating for many, many years. And it was only when I started thinking back, connecting dots of the times when I was sitting in that stope, that's 3.5 feet high, you know, it's thousands of meters underground. And what is safe there? Well, we had so many events that could have killed all of us, could have killed some of us. So again, that couldn't be the definition. And it is in that environment that it was like evolving to me that safe, deep safe, is the inherent and systemic readiness to respond to risk. Because you're not going to reduce risk to zero. You're not going to eliminate risk. Risk is going to be there. You can control it as much as you can, but there are so many circumstances in which that risk can turn into an event. So what do we need to be? We need to be ready to respond to that risk. And you can do that on different levels. You know, at a strategic level in organization, at Renier's level. Just a couple examples. How do you create risk readiness? You create risk transparency. You have the right policies to ensure that people speak up. You resource people so that they have the right tools, equipment, and channels to talk through. You develop consistency in your approach to risk, to the management of risk, so that people are not, you know, left in a lurch when they have to make decisions. At a tactical level, you have to install learning systems. You have to integrate safety in operations, and that's what Renier said. Their operating model is a link between strategy and execution. That is the operating model. That's integration of safety and operations. That's a tactical level. You have to have a systemic focus on serious injury, fatal and catastrophic risks. That's a critical piece. At operational level, you have to install risk competence. You have to constantly reduce risk, substitute risk, harness risk. And most important there for me is the dynamic control verification. Your critical controls for your critical risks, they don't stay alive. They falter, they fail, they decay over time. And that's got to have to be controlled all the time. And at the team level, 3 things for me is risk readiness. Constant discovery of risk in our environment, constant reporting or acting on risks, and mindfulness, the understanding of what we have to understand in terms of risk that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Those are just examples of how we create the readiness to respond to risk. But there's an add-on. We have to do this relentlessly. Every day when you get up into your stope, into your workplace, safety starts from scratch. What you've done yesterday counts for nothing, because you have to redo and rediscover today and create readiness to respond to risk again. So that's my definition of transformation, what you transform to.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, Renier, do you distinguish between transactional and transformational leadership, and maybe how do you do that?
Yes, Scott, we definitely distinguish between those, and you know, as you know, transactional leadership for us involves the structured approach to follow the processes and controls to achieve your your goal, right? Or to successfully execute your activity. In our industry, the majority of the leadership that we see is transactional, right? And that on the other side is the transformational leadership that we alluded to earlier around the inspirational side of leadership, you know, where we challenge the norm, we break through the barriers, and we challenge the status quo. That transformational leadership is something that changes the world around us and the way we live and the way we operate. But that transformational leadership is obviously what we need to really achieve our purpose and our ambition if we want to change the world and make the world, you know, a better place for all. The problem with is that today's leaders cannot be one or the other. They need to be ambidextrous in the application of transactional and transformational, because you cannot only be transformational all the time and have no stability to back it up, right? And that's why, going back to our models that we have and our frameworks in Anglo-American, we have the operating model, which is the PDCA, which is more the transactional side of leadership, you can also management, right? And then we have what we call a program called P101, which is designed to break the barriers and challenge the best practice that's out there to see what is the next ceiling, what is the next best practice, right? How can we just be better than, you know, what is currently best? And then in the longer term, we have our Future Smart program that, from an Anglo-American perspective, group-wide, looks at the technologies that enables the future we want. And this is technologies that is not off the shelf. These are things that where people challenge the what-if questions, and, you know, the really transformational technologies that will change the way the mining industry operates in the future. Some of these are looking at, you know, digitization, which Corrie alluded to earlier, with the digitization of our control verification and the automation of some of the activities we do. But also, one of the immediate gains there is the provision of intelligence to our operators. And Corrie talked about the resilience earlier. Without the intelligence, without the information, you cannot be as resilient as you should be. And we have a workforce today that is much more knowledgeable in terms of data and in terms of technology. So it should be relatively easy for us to provide them with that resources, and as part of that, the information they need to be resilient and risk resilient to the risks that they face in their daily operation.
Good, thank you. So Corrie, you touched on it a little bit, but, you know, what exactly is safety transformation within an organization?
Yeah, the term is actually quite wide, I guess, but it's how do you change an organization in terms of its approaches, its fundamentals, and we have a 6-step model. Everything that we do fits in somewhere in this model of how do you go through a sequence, a planned process of change, of transformation. And the first one, there's always a starting point for us, is the measurement and benchmarking of the culture of the organization. That in that we understand what is the intent of safety in that organization. And often it is also for the first time that the leadership of that organization understand what people perceive as the intent of the organization for safety. So what is the why in safety? And is that message consistent from the top to the bottom? And then we measure that. And then in order to create that consistency throughout the organization, we propagate 4 strategies of change. And I memorized this by the Nike acronym of do it, just do it. In that do it, there are 4 strategies. D is for discovering of risk. You have to have strategies and systems and processes that constantly discover risk, because risk is dynamic. The second one is optimization of your capabilities, your resourcing in the organization. The third one is integration of systems, of technology, how you ensure that your operating model and your safety process is the same. And the last one is the T of do it is transform. How do you ensure that your culture is going through the changes in paradigm, the changes in fundamentals as you get the messaging in the organization right. The next step is align leaders with practices, because if you think about you have a change in vision, you have revisioned your organization, you're now looking at stating your strategies in terms of those. Your leaders have to be aligned with that. They have to act according to those fundamentals. And that's the Safe Leader program that we have, that shifts people's thinking from managing to leading, so that they can become, I love the term that Renier says, ambidextrous, and they also understand what leadership is. But then we also have to ensure that the way we respond to failure, we have processes, human resource management systems in the organization. How do we reward performance? How do we discipline performance failures? Those practices or processes have to align so that the leaders know how to deal with things in the right way. If they act on outdated procedures, human resource procedures, then they won't change their behaviors. And then you have to re-engineer systems, constantly refocus on risk, regenerate your systems all the time, because you have to make your systems dynamic in the organization. And the last step is then you have to reskill people. And the term we like to use is reskill them in risk competence. Make them smart in dealing with risk. And sometimes you have to make them smart in taking risk, because they are going to, and they have to take risk anyway. If you go down a mine shaft, you're taking risks. So you have to make people smart and competent in that arena. So those are the processes, the steps, so to speak, you go through transforming an organization.
Great, thank you for that framework. Renier, how did you approach safety transformation in the copper division at Anglo American?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yeah, we obviously first recognized that we've seen some steady improvement over the past years in our safety performance, but we were stagnating, and we were getting the odd lost time injury monthly. We were still having other small incidents, but more concerningly, we were getting high potential incidents that were reported, and that indicated to us that we were still quite vulnerable to certain risks. And that's when we started thinking about a safety transformation program. We got Corrie and the team in from Safemap to do the assessment that he referred to. We had almost everybody involved. I think it was over 80% of the workforce were involved in the assessment. And from that assessment, we established where is the weaknesses in the operational safety culture that we had at the operations in Chile. And then we started designing what do we need to fix these and focus on these weaknesses and get them repaired, so to speak. And included in those were, we've got a safe leadership practices, which is really a guidebook on what are the things and the behaviors that safe leaders do, right? Because sometimes people need a bit of a playbook to really understand or to remind them of what those things are. Not everything comes natural to everybody, right? And then the other thing we needed to do was create that presence in the field. And this is not the guy that kicks up the tires, as Corrie mentioned earlier. This is the person that builds the trust at all levels, in the team that works for him or with him. And that fosters that psychologically safe level that you want with that trust relationship, so that the truth goes through the organization really quickly. Another part of that was the coaching part. We needed to train people how to coach each other, and we're still obviously doing that today. And we also needed to show people how to spot hazards, how to to be aware of your surroundings, how to, go in with new eyes every day and forget about, yesterday or the 10 years you've had in the company, right? And then that complacency that creeps in with doing the same task every day. So we included all of that. We also have programs aimed at the digitization of our critical control verification activities. And obviously all of these things means nothing if you don't integrate this into your management model, from the start. They will not be sustainable, and they'll just be another flavor of the month or the safety initiatives. And from the start, we said we will not do that. We will make this we will not label this as a specific program, and it will just be how we do safety from now on forward. So that started a couple of years ago. We are starting to see something there, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that journey.
So Corrie, a bit of a hot topic as of late, but people talk about safety 2 and new safety, or new view and HOP these days a lot as a paradigm change. Do you agree?
To some degree, you have to ask, what is a paradigm change? The fundamentals of a paradigm, or a paradigm change, is a change in fundamentals. And maybe from that perspective, one can say, yes, safety 2, new safety, safety differently, are attempting to change fundamentals. And I've worked the whole deep safe philosophy since that I started with this whole idea was in 1986. That was in the deep safe terminology, but that was very much safety 2, HOP, and new view, because I started working with the concepts of Deming, and that to me is actually safety 2. Way before any of the books appeared and papers appeared on what is now branded as safety 2. But there's an interesting paper that I read it's published in 1995 by Gary Wynne and Lorraine Probert, and it's called Philosopher's Stone, and say, is there a paradigm shift happening in safety? Now, this is before safety 2. That was basically still in safety 1 days. So basically safety 1 is what is termed as BBS, or safety management systems, the old style, if you could call it that. That's how it's been branded these days. But they identified five things that have to happen if a paradigm shift really occur. And they use quality movement. The quality of Deming was a paradigm shift. And the 4 things that they identified was, first one, there must be a critical event that catalyzes a paradigm shift. No paradigm shift happened without a critical event. Now, in quality, that paradigm or critical event was the Japanese manufacturing capabilities led by Deming that changed the competitiveness of Japan and was basically dumping United States into a deep uncompetitiveness. So that was a critical event. Now, do we have something in safety? Well, we had many critical events in safety. We had Piper Alpha, that changed things. We had Deepwater Horizon. We had tailings dams failures in Brazil. But nothing that changes the paradigm from safety 1 to safety 2. I don't see that happening. On the contrary, we are seeing a significant increase in the last decade, maybe, in fatal accidents, in fatal accident rates in United States and globally. And the question is being rightfully asked: are we losing the battle? Are we losing the battle in controlling serious injuries and fatal risks in organizations? Maybe we are. And that was a topic of another webinar that I made about, are we loosening controls at the front end? through the softening approach of safety to safety differently, deep safe as well. You know, let me not exclude myself from that thinking. The second thing is incompatibility. There has to be a significant incompatibility between the old and the new. And if you look at safety 2 and safety 1, I don't see that incompatibility. You know, upstream, the thinking of safety 2, that's not new in safety 1. In safety management. Worker engagement is a hot topic in safety 2. That's very old. The learning instead of investigation of incidents, that's not new either. So you have to ask, what is new? Well, maybe language, that's the third one they say have to change. The language has to change. And I think in safety 2, you get a whole lot of new language being spoken in safety. But even that may be repackaged in some way or another. You know, we talk about work as imagined versus work as done. Everybody tried to use this buzzword these days. Or Frank Bird in loss control safety, International Loss Control Institute, he talked about that in the 70s, about that difference. The aversion to zero accidents, that's a language of safety 2. They go against zero accidents. That is new language? Maybe not. Maybe that has also been preceded. James Reason wrote about that in 2000 already. So I don't know if this is really a paradigm shift. Tools, quality management brought in a whole new toolbox that was incompatible with the way they did it before. This is now process-related management of the quality in the process, not quality in the products. Well, in safety 2 and safety differently, there's no new tools. I don't see that. And then, is there a culture change between the old and the new? Well, maybe there is now in safety. There's certainly, you know, culture change. You have to say, is there something that's now unacceptable that wasn't before? Now, in safety, there is a lot. You know, a few decades ago, you would have people not wearing safety belts in cars, drink driving, smoking. These are things that shifted dramatically between the old and the new. But is there things that change between safety 1 and safety 2, between behavioral safety and safety differently? I don't know if there's that significant culture change happening. So maybe we do. We do need new types of risk systems, new risk systems. We need new tools and techniques, and we need new competence. And that is yet to come, if it's going to come. So I'm not too sure about that.
Great. I'm sure we could have a hour-long discussion around just that question. So thank you for that, Corrie. And then Renier, how do you measure this transformation in your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I just wanted to, just before I answer your question, just make a comment on Corrie's answer on the safety 2 and HOP. And as an executive in, you know, an organization that's got active operations across the world, to me, it's not really important if we have what name we give the current approach to safety. We know we are working in a more complex environment from every angle. But for me, it's more important, you know, that the people, as you know, as Corrie mentioned, comes out of the mine every day. And for if any of us have had the tragic duty to tell anybody that they've lost a family member or a loved one because of your operations or activities, you very quickly realize that it doesn't really matter what you call it. What really matters is that you actively pursue, you know, that nobody gets harmed at our operations, right? And no matter if that is an aspirational or achievable, or that debate can go on forever. But every day we successfully operate without harming anybody, for me, is a small win. And tomorrow we start afresh, right? And tonight on the new shift, we start afresh. But back to your question around the measuring transformation. Look, we have the conventional lagging indicators that we measure. We use this to benchmark ourselves against, our peers. And we do also have follow-up assessments, that is periodically run either through externals like Safemap or also internally through our own HR processes. And this gives us a little bit of a qualitative view on, the safety culture in our organization. What we've seen, though, is that since we've started the safety transformation program, we've seen the definite increase in the level of trust and psychological safety that people are, and we see that in the number of hazards people are reporting. At one of our operations, we've seen the hazards reporting go up by 200% in 1 year. This is significantly higher than other operations where we haven't started this program. To give you an idea, at the one mine, we are reporting about 11,000 hazards a year, whereas in another operation that we haven't done this, they are reporting about 200 to 300. They're similar sized operations. So you can clearly see the difference in awareness and the difference in trust that people have, that when I report this, nothing bad will happen to me, right? And management will respond to it. Now, we're still working on that, and I still don't believe we've reached the optimal number, and if there is such a thing as an optimal number. We've also started using a lot more leading indicators to tell us what we should be doing next and how can we be more proactive. And this is, I think, where we really can be transformational. And maybe this is for us what new safety is how do we be more, or how are we more proactive rather than reactive? While it is important to keep the resilience at operational level, it's also important for us to try and predict where we should be casting more focus and more resources. What is the likelihood of something happening at a certain shift, at a certain time, with a certain activity looking forward? Because, while we have our safety resilience, how do we even improve that by removing our exposure to those risks going forward and looking forward to next week or next month or next year?
Corrie, the concept of unconditional safety is used a lot, but very complex and misunderstood. Do companies sacrifice safety for profit, in your opinion?
Well, I think we could probably have a whole webinar just on this topic. Who makes the claim companies sacrifice safety for profit? I don't know of any company that would do that. I don't know of any organization that would willingly sacrifice people to harm in order to make profit. It just, to me, that's utter nonsense that people make. And who makes the claim? Well, probably just consultants and authors of books. Or people who present at conferences, because I think it sells books, it sells their products, and this ambulance chasing that happens in industry. Just yesterday, I saw in Queensland, Australia, there were 2 deaths at a zinc mine, and immediately it is dramatized. Immediately it's on the news. And people speak about how, we shouldn't be pursuing wealth and at the cost of people's lives. This was a statement made on the news, in Australian television just this week. That is so unfair, grossly overstated. And it really bugs me. It's a bit of a bugbear for me, is that, or be in my bonnet is the right term, that we do this. And we kind of want to sell with the safety profession ourselves inside an organization. Maybe we to be blamed a little bit about this too, because when things go well in safety, we like to say, well, our safety department is doing great work. If things go bad, the graphs go the wrong direction, we kind of like to say, well, the management is not taking safety on in the way they should. But you know, I've with Anglo American, I mentioned earlier on, I was on this elimination of fatalities task force, and Anglo is an organization that is deeply embedded in the value of safety in their organization. I know the previous CEO, Mark Cutifani, was absolutely personally committed and devoted to safety. And that message is right throughout the organization. And when you have an incident on a mine, there was an incident on one of the mines in Anglo, and people come out afterwards and say, well, they sacrifice safety for profit. You know, it really hurts me because I can go on and on about how invalid that statement is. You know, to use one incident, you can make a lot of hay, and profit from using one statement. You know, like the accidents and incident BP had, Deepwater Horizon. Everyone is pointing the fingers to BP and the management and how they failed safety and how they sacrificed safety. Utter nonsense. You know, that's not happening in the organization. And to me, that's so unfair that we start to do this kind of things in order to sacrifice, in order to gain other objectives with us.
So Renier, how do you embrace this concept in Anglo-based metals, and what pressures does this place on your leadership?
For us, we are not playing for the pavilions here, right? We are playing for ourselves and to make sure that our people that work for us come work safely with no harm, that there's no long-term impact on anything around us. In actual fact, we want the opposite. We want people to be better while they are with us, in our communities to be better while we are actively operating in their regions. So safety for us is a core value. I mean, it's been there for many years now, and we are certainly not where we want to be. And that's why we have these programs in place. We have fully embraced the safety as being unconditional, and we always put the safety of our people first. It's everywhere in everything that you see in Anglo American. You'll see that happens as a first thing. All our meetings starts with safety discussions and all that. But all of these things aside, you know, for those of us with operational experience, you'll know that it's much easier said than done. We still make decisions at all levels with unintended consequences. And we are not always fully aware of these unintended messages or these subliminal messages that we send when we make decisions. And this is some of the pressures and some of the awareness that we want to create within our leadership teams, to understand that subliminal messages, when you do say something, that you make sure you qualify, you know, that this will still happen within the safety being unconditional. Now, what we rather want to focus on is, how do we go forward from here? How do we foster psychological safety and the unconditionality of safety, right? And the first one is obviously the operating model. We are focusing heavily on planned work. We believe that planned work is, you know, much safer, obviously, than unplanned work. And, you know, all the data, you know, proves that. So having our operating model in there and having all tasks properly planned is probably one of the first steps to really prove this unconditionality and to really make sure that everything we do is safe. The second part is still, you know, we need to reduce complexity and bureaucracy. We still have a lot of that in our management models. And then also we need to use advertisements and market, you know, the right culture. So, you know, when people put their hand up and say, look, I'm not going to do this because I don't feel safe, or I'm not, you know, I see this as a concern. How do we market that incident to the same level as how we would market a high potential incident, right? Because that time that somebody put their hand up, and say, look, I'm not prepared to continue working. And even more importantly, the response of my immediate supervisor to me putting up my hand, we should be marketing those type of incidents as almost as positive incidents that can positively influence the culture. You know, we focus heavily on the investigation part of when an incident almost happened or when we have an incident, but we don't market those positive things. And that is the positive reinforcement of the culture we want of, you know, being unconditional about safety. So, for instance, at one of our operations, we've been using storytelling to help us with this. So when we have this type of event happening where somebody put up their hand, we would create a marketing story that we could disseminate throughout the organization. So people can see if you do that, you know, we will respond in the right way, and our managers can see, well, they're also allowed and you know, empowered to take the right management response when people do that. So it's an interesting concept, but we are obviously still working towards it, and it is a difficult thing to achieve, to be completely unconditional, certainly from an execution perspective.
As an example, a practical example of how unconditionality is embraced in Renier's organization, Anglo American. On this EOF program, Elimination of Fatalities process that we did, we visited a mine and we worked in pairs. We go out and talk to workers in the workplaces and so on. So I got into this area where there was a contractor sitting there, and he had his helpers with him, 4 or 5 people sitting around doing nothing. And so I start talking to them about risks and what they think can be serious injuries around here and so on. So we were sitting and talking, and they're doing nothing. And I said to them, so what are you guys doing here? And he says, well, actually, at the moment, we're doing nothing. I said, why? He says, well, we've been doing nothing for the whole morning. This is like 12 o'clock in the day. I said, why are you doing nothing? He said, no, we're waiting for one of the safety staff to come over and do a gas test on a transfer bin that we are welding here. We want to go in and weld it, but we have to have a gas test done. I said, where is the guy? He says, no, he's not, we're waiting. It turns out, I said to him, so this job that you're doing, this is a transfer bin you're welding. He says, we had to spend 2 days before we came on site to complete all the requirements that Anglo requires from us to do this job safely. We spent 2 days doing that. The job that was allocated to us is taking 3 days. And this is now the 3rd day. We just need to do the welding now. He said, and I said to him, so is this a long time for a job like this? He says, I can do this job in 3 to 4 hours. But in Anglo, it is a 3-day job. And I said, why? He says, well, they do not compromise on safety, and we just have to fit in with that. Now, that tells me the organization is not only willing to talk about it, they're paying this contractor for 3 days to do that job, which he could have done in 3 hours. But they want to be sure it is absolutely done safely. That is embracing unconditional safety. It costs them a lot of money to do that. So to me, that's a beautiful example of that unconditionality.
Right. So Corrie, with you know, everybody talking about Chat GPT and with AI powered vision cameras and smart PPE, you know, what do you think the future leaders of safety will look like with this high-tech world that we're living in?
Scott, this is also a big topic and probably a whole webinar on its own. You know, what safety will look like in the new world, in Industry 4.0. So I'm going to be very quick about this. You know, in a highly automated, digitized world where things happen at the speed of light, where teams are small and independent, where people work from home or from other bases, and we are connected digitally, that will have a tremendous impact on leadership. The kind of people that will be excelling as leaders and as managers in those organizations, they will be extremely tech smart people. And I think there's a threat of disconnection between people. Even when we talk about the connected worker, digitally connected, but that's socially disconnected. And I think that the organization of the future is going to be socially a very cold world that does not have the high level of interaction between teams that we have now. So, but you know, on the upside, the employee of the future, the leader of the future, maybe because of this enormous support we get through technology, we will start getting a life outside of the work situation, more time for our families. Maybe that's a great positive that's coming our way that we don't necessarily appreciate at this stage. But certainly, the leader of that kind of environment is going to be a very, very different beast.
Renier, how do you embrace technology and advanced management approaches in Anglo?
I mentioned earlier that the work we're doing around the digitalization of our critical control verification in order for us to manage our risk in real time, which is that for me is sort of the first big win that we're looking at. And for some of these controls, getting them online and connected is relatively simple, but there are others that require better technology and some breakthrough thinking, and all of this is going to happen. We are also developing a program where we could use this data input to dynamically predict our exposure to risk. And this is where I think the second big win for us will be, until eventually we will be running operations without people, and we'll remove people from harm's way completely. But in the industry, we're still a little bit away from getting that, achieving that. But this is, as Corrie mentioned, not just about technology. It's about the leadership transition that is needed from where we are now in the next, 10 years. I believe we are going to see a real change in the type of leaders that we employ at our operations and in our industry. These are leaders that understand, expanding opportunities, the technology that's available, that's in touch with the technology development, but also they are going to have to be more agile with and collaborative with their teams, because now the teams that they are going to be leading are experts in data. They grew up in the data and information age. This is an untapped resource, and if leaders and managers think they are going to be leading teams autocratically like in the past, that time is over. Our leaders are going to have to be more sensitive, more caring, more engaging, and more socially in contact with their teams than ever before, because they are going to be part of the solution, and they are going to be part of your resilient, sustainable solution in the future. We had a technical conference recently across all of Anglo American, and all of the top leaders were there, and we had this discussion, and one of the mantras that came out of there that resonated with everybody is that we wanted to make it impossible for people to get hurt at our operations. Now, that's a seriously ambitious statement to make, but it was inconceivable to make a statement like that 20 years ago. So the fact that people are saying this means that we can see the top of the mountain. I believe it's possible that we will see the impossibility of getting hurt being achieved by the mining industry, not long from here, still within in our time. So that's what I think of that.
Definitely inspirational. Definitely appreciate both Corrie and Renier coming together today to have this discussion. I think invaluable topics, and yeah, I think a lot of them we could have dug into for an additional hour. But thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And maybe just ask if you have any closing remarks before we wrap this up today. Corrie?
The Renier statement there at the end, achieving a situation where people don't get hurt. We cannot step away from that as the ultimate. That's why we are here. And I used to be very strongly against the statement of zero accidents and zero harm and these kind of things. because of the downside of it, because of the negative effects that it's having in organizations where people stop reporting, etc. But beyond that, we cannot change the message that we care about people. And we cannot say to people, well, you know, you're going to get hurt in our operations. And that's unfortunately the situation we have. What a bizarre statement to make. We have to be inspirational about reaching perfection, pursuing perfection. We cannot stop doing that.
Yeah, exactly, Corrie. And I think for us in the industry, look, the safest way to operate our mines is not to have them, right? So if we do not have these mines and these operations, we will not expose people to risk, and we cannot get away from that we do have risk exposure, and it's the way that we mitigate that exposure and the way we control that really gets us to achieve our goals in terms of, you know, operating, you know, profitable businesses. So we cannot get away from that, and the people then rely on us not just to keep them safe, but also as a livelihood, the communities, micro and macroeconomic economies where we work. That's my dog getting at the postman. But anyway, I think from our perspective, look, we are on a journey. We are not there. We've come a long way, but we are really dedicated and passionate about achieving this in the short term. And I've got no doubt that you know, the industry is moving along with, or even some cases ahead of us, and we will achieve our goal in terms of making sure that it's impossible to get hurt at our operation.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to share this with us today.